good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to all. This is Shobani Croy from Kolkata. Welcome you to the second part of the webinar entitled Urban Poverty in Contemporary Cities, the Determining Role of Land Policies and Instruments, organized by INHAF in collaboration with German Technical Cooperation, GIZ, and Cities Alliance. This is the 44th webinar organized by INHAF since June 2020 under the theme of Rethinking Indian Cities in the context of disruption happened all across the globe. The series is an integral part of the initiative launched last year called Suri, Citizens Urban Initiative. Suri is a societal effort spearheaded by India's leading professionals, thinkers, and practitioners to engage with a conversation on pathways towards productive, inclusive, and livable urban future for India. The webinars are seen as opening the much needed societal dialogue on handling of the urbanization process and develop cities so that they don't remain only the engines of economic growth, but also become socially cohesive, culturally vibrant, and ecologically sensitive places. Urban poverty and associated vulnerabilities have been emerging as the central concern in our cities. In the discussion on urban poverty, access to land is a pressing issue. Competition is acute for land that is well located, suitable for a variety of urban users, especially for affordable housing, and are also serviced. Both state institutions and markets frequently fail to provide sufficient service land in suitable locations to accommodate the rapid urban growth and address inequality, particularly relating to access to housing, and regulatory arrangements are often inadequate. With this background, the webinar has been organized in two sessions with participation of several experts from India and other countries in Global South. Let me briefly mention the highlights of yesterday's conversation. The session deliberated on various facets of land problem, conflict of interest among diverse stakeholders, and practices to address informality. The first presentation was on the issues and concerns about citywide slum upgrading and political challenges associated with it. The success of upgradation depends on physical and economic integration of the slums in the city and agreement about the right to city for the underprivileged. The second presentation on Brazil discussed the principles of city statute, slum upgrading program in Sao Paulo, and its progressive land policy instruments like inclusionary zoning. The third was on informality in Latin American cities and its implications for land use regulations and land policies. Apart from ownership-based tenure regularization practices, other forms of communal tenure, like community land trust, was also discussed. Land value capture has been used as a tool to balance the costs and benefits of investment in infrastructure and social housing by urban local bodies in Latin America. The presentation on Kochi, Kerala, highlighted about the LIFE mission, Livelihood Inclusion and Financial Empowerment Mission, its convergence with PMAY and its achievements like access to land and housing for the landless and homeless in Kerala as a continuation of the progressive policies of land reform in the state. Presentation on Mexico discussed about the strong presence of informality and the role of proactive state by instituting the national land policy as a game changer for urban development, urban improvement program, and land management program. This followed with a discussion emphasizing the need to develop a consensus among various stakeholders about the social and environmental functions of land and the incorporation of its attributes in the master plans and land policy for the urban centers. We also have a distinguished panel today to take forward the conversation. I request Dr. Anaclaudia Rossbach, Regional Manager, Cities Alliance, to kindly initiate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Subanik. Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to welcome you from the Cities Alliance. We are co-organizing this series of 2 webinars with INHAF, but also with GIZ. So it has been an intense process of setting up the context, setting up the speakers, and identifying, how better to address this issue. I think it's nice to remind the original question where this initiative emerged. The big question Kirtee remembered us yesterday was why Islam upgrading hasn't scaled up in India yet. So I think it's very important that we keep this simple question in mind while doing the presentations and afterwards in the debate, because this is actually the big elephant in the room, right, Kirtee? I believe yesterday we had interesting inputs, especially from the Latin American speakers who brought, advances and the progress in terms of policies at the national level. In the case of Mexico, a land policy. In the case of the city of São Paulo, how the urban planning instruments have evolved over time. From all Latin America, what research is showing about, the prevalence of informality, the informal economy, but the informal settlements in the region. So all these elements are very relevant for us to understand why Latin America achieved this point where Islam upgrading is basically institutionalized and recognized as a policy in most of the countries, despite having some countries as the champions of Islam upgrading, let's say so, right? For me, the biggest takeaway from yesterday's presentation can be reflected in the two points raised, one by Billy at the beginning, which was Islam upgrading is a political issue, right? So we already have technical tools available to us. So the matter is not solely technical. It's a political aspect. It's a political aspect not only related to responsibilities of governments, but also from the whole society. It's very clear that in many countries, in many cities, we do have elites that don't want to have the poor in their background. So this is a fact that we need to recognize. And the second takeaway that I had from yesterday was Cynthia's message, informed by research. Cynthia Goethe, a professor from urban economics in Argentina, from informed research that cities that are playing the Robin Hood, they are doing better, actually. Cities that are able in Latin America to redistribute the costs and benefits in a fair manner in the territory, they are doing better as a city, right, in terms of overall development and placing themselves internationally in the markets. So these are, for me, 2 key messages that we should also have in mind before starting the conversation today. So Billy said the issue is political, right? So let's try to understand from Brazil. Ines Magalháes is here. She was the Minister of Cities in Brazil. Why? What is the rationale behind the decision of a national government in setting up and designing a national level Islam upgrading policy? The same for South Africa. We also have Ahmedi Vawda with us. This is a country that also took a decision at some time of prioritizing political Islam upgrading. So it's key for us to understand what's behind that, right? But also let's evolve on the reflection about India. So having the 2 cases on the ground, having Renu, Ajay, activists, Dr. Mohanty, activists, right? People engaged in the area for many, many years. I don't know if it's a coincidence, Dr. Mohanty, Ajay, Ines, Ahmedi, that we have met ourselves many, many times in the last 15 years, let's say so, since the IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa forum started on human settlements, exchanging on policies, experiences, etc. So we are here again after 15 years, and I think this is a proof that we are all activists, right, and will not give up. until we see, evolution on the ground. I think we all believe, like Kirtee, that slum upgrading is doable. So I'm glad we have this set of speakers today, because everybody forgot one important element yesterday. We spoke about political will, we spoke about technical tools, but we didn't speak about passion. And I believe all the panelists that are here today, they are here today because they are very passionate, and they have been pushing from several fronts, from technical, from political fronts, to see the agenda moving. So for me, this conversation today is extremely relevant, and it can provide us many insights on why Islam upgrading hasn't scaled up in India, but not only in India, but overall globally. So the COVID leaves us with this important legacy, right? We need to address the vulnerable territories. We need to address the poor. So it's a global challenge, and we are all in that together. So, so let's start the panel. Maybe we can start with you, Ajay. Are you online? Are you connected? I don't see your face.
Thanks, Anna, and Shovnik for the wonderful summary of the proceedings yesterday. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join, so I missed all the wonderful presentations which were made. Well, let me straight go to a few points that I want to make as a panelist today. We are discussing the role of land policies and instruments in the context of scaling up slum upgrading. And in this perspective, let me start with a disclaimer. I agree completely with Anna that there is global evidence that slum upgrading is the most affordable and scalable option for achieving the goal of slum-free cities. There are challenges, however, as were demonstrated under the National Slum Upgrading Program, the Rajiv Awas Yojana, RAY. I'm sure Dr. Mohanty would be talking about it since he was the mission director. And when under the Rajiv Awas Yojana, investment proposals were invited from the cities, very few cities submitted the proposals for in situ slum upgrading. And land tenure issues were just one of the constraints. We also need to keep in mind a couple of other constraints. And I can readily think of two constraints. One is technology and capacities at the local level to retrofit network services in dense settlements. Brazil is a prime example where such capacities were required when they went for in situ slum upgrading. And secondly, and equally important, the local governments have very low capacities. Not only local governments, but even the implementing agencies have very low capacity to engage with the communities in preparation of slum upgrading program. The communities need to play a centric role in planning, implementation, and monitoring of in situ slum upgrading program. There is the need for a strong partnership. Having mentioned the disclaimer right up front, let me straight away move to the land policy issues. Incidentally, when I started my career in the urban sector 30 years back, my first research assignment as a youngster was to look at the efficacy of land policies in India. And I remember looking at an antiquated document which was prepared in 1950s. That's the land policy of India. I'm not sure many of the participants would have even seen that. And it is very clearly mentioned in the document that the goal of the land policy is to enable timely supply of affordable land for development. And this, mind you, this was done when India was trying to, push land assembly for industrial development. It wasn't really city development centric, it was industrial development centric. And under the land policy, there are three instruments for land assembly, which are, all of us are aware of that: compulsory land acquisition using the eminent domain, negotiated land acquisition, and land pooling. Now, if we all of us are familiar with these land assembly instruments, none of them is dovetailed to slum upgrading needs. Yes, compulsory land acquisition has been used to good effect for in situ slum redevelopment. Uh, Mumbai slum rehabilitation scheme is a good example. But to my mind, a version of land pooling can be put to good effect to support in situ slum upgrading as well. But this would work only if the land owning agencies are able to reclaim a part of the occupied land. And this can be done using planning mechanisms to further densify the informal settlements. This was a model used in Delhi, and it worked well only in 3 projects where part of the land went back to the landowning agency, and the informal settler families were concentrated in part of the land. And mind you, Delhi has resettled more than 500,000 households over the years. And we only have 3 settlements which went for in situ slum upgrading, which highlights the limitations of the use of land pooling uh, instrument for in situ slum upgrading. Now, if we were to unravel slum upgrading, why do we want to do it? We want to encourage slum upgrading to improve the quality of life of informal settler families. And we, under the such initiatives, we would be able to do this by improving the access of the families to network services and by facilitating improvement in their dwellings as well. And land tenure or security of tenure is a stumbling block for the implementation of both these components. Service providers are hesitant to provide services if the households do not have security of tenure, and similarly, families are hesitant in investing in home improvement if they are not sure of the tenure as well. Uh, Having said all this, um, one must also realize most of the lands occupied by informal settler families belong to various government agencies. And the land owning agencies are hesitant to write off lands from their asset column of the balance sheet. Though the values are notional, they can't use the uh, land for any other purpose, but still they are unwilling to write it off. How do we break this impasse is the big issue. Either the cities can wait for the appropriate policy environment, wait for the appropriate national slum policy, wait for the state strategies or the evolution of the concept of social value of land, or the cities can do something in the interim to ensure wide scale adoption of in situ slum upgrading. If you look at security of tenure, it's a wide spectrum between no security of tenure and full title to land. I believe there is the need for cities to work with the landowning agencies by looking at de facto options to provide security of tenure to informal settler families. Can the landowning agencies give a commitment to the city, the implementing agencies for slum upgrading, that the informal settler families would not be evicted for specific number of years? Will it work? Well, our past experience shows it has a good chance of working. UNICEF had started an initiative called the Urban Basic Services for the Poor, maybe a couple of decades back, which was later adopted as a government program. Under the UBSP, the land owning agencies gave a commitment that the families would not be evicted for 7 years. And this encouraged the service providers to provide services like water, sanitation, solid waste management, street paving, street electrification, stormwater drains, and it also encouraged informal settler families to invest in home improvement. I think we need to explore this option. The cities need to explore this option, and there is the need to have a partnership between the city management, the implementing agencies, communities, and landowning agencies to explore this option. Another disclaimer that security of tenure is only a facilitating mechanism. It's not a panacea for ensuring scaling up of in situ slum upgrading. We also have examples in Delhi, in India, where land titles were given 20 years back, but with no accompanying improvement in services or facilitation to access institutional home loan for home improvement. And it resulted in no improvement in quality of life for the slum dwellers as well. My last point, Anna, and I'll end with that. Yes, in situ slum upgrading is important, but we need a bouquet of solutions to reach the goal of slum free cities. And we could also be looking at the option of in situ slum redevelopment, whereby new housing is provided on site to informal settler families, either subsidized partly or fully. That's for free. But the scaling up is dependent on the quantum of resources available to subsidize free housing. Can we bring in innovations here? Can we unlock the value of land and use land as a resource to fund in situ slum redevelopment, whereby this can be done by providing incentive FSIs? This experiment has worked well. When I say well, it's a relative term. It's not a perfect model, but has been scaled up in the city of Mumbai. To my knowledge, you know, households in excess of 300,000 have already been provided free housing under the program. Let me end with this. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Ajay. Lots of important points. Billy also said yesterday, political will is translated through budget, right? So budget allocation is very relevant. And we are talking about very poor people. But I think I will move to Renu, and I think you've made the perfect link around security of tenure. Just a reminder about the case of Peru. Peru has a very, very famous program of titling, of providing security of tenure. And it didn't translate over years to more access to services and improvement. Cynthia mentioned that yesterday. That we have to be clear. That was a very important point. But Renu, over to you. I'm not reading the bios. The bios are all there on the chat. So I'm just saving this time. So Renu, over to you to talk about tenure.
Thank you, Anna. So a lot of the stuff has already been said, so that makes my job easier. The question that I am going to explore over here is to tenure or not to tenure. Tenure is a dream. Title is a dream. And I'm going to use the word tenure and title interchangeably over here. And we've heard Ajay and you say very clearly that land is the key. It is vital to building inclusive cities, to making people resilient, to having equality and sustainable communities. And we also know that cities that tenure, which you just mentioned, progress socially and economically. If this is a precondition, if having tenure is a precondition to ending poverty, then why isn't the state convinced? What are the policies? Why are the policies and plans going in the opposite direction? So at CURE, we decided to do a bit of maths, and we asked ourselves two questions. We asked ourselves, what would it cost the state to tenure? And what does it cost the poor when they are relocated? So the first question about what it would cost the government, we looked at the 1 in 5 or almost 22.4% of 377 million urban people in India. As per the NSSO statistics, almost 90% of slum households have never ever been granted a title. 1 in 10 don't even have the appropriate IDs. 1 in 3 lives in rental housing. And there are nearly 820,000 women home-based workers. There are 17 million women entrepreneurs whose incomes depend on being tenure secure. So we put all these numbers into our algorithm, and we looked at just two costs to the government, which were the key and the most significant cost to the government: the legislative cost of tenuring and the administrative cost to implement the idea. We kept the value of land out of this equation because, as we heard Ajay and yesterday, it's a very notional. It will vary by context from large and small cities. Besides, it depends on what is the value, what is the use that you are attaching to the particular land that you hope to recover. So, and also because just less than 1% of the city's land is actually in the inner city areas, is under occupation. If you look at Delhi, it's 3% overall, and I'm assuming 1% in the inner city areas. So we actually didn't factor that in, and we found that the total cost of tenuring and total cost of giving people land titles in situ development would be roughly around 2,500 crores in Indian rupees. To calculate the benefits, we factored in money that the city would save for extension of sanitation, water, health, and other social infrastructure into areas at the city's edge. We also took in the fact that the city stands to benefit from stamp duties and taxes as their collections increase, as people get into more formal titles, and the enhanced productivity of women entrepreneurs and women workers. The amazing amplification was 14 times. While the cost to the government was 2,500 crores, the value of tenuring would be roughly 35,000 crores on a yearly basis. 14 times was the amplification. Then we asked the second question: what are the costs to the poor when you relocate them? We looked at the economics. We looked at the economics of resettlement, and we found that when you relocate people, the poverty deepens. When both in terms of percentages and in terms of the headcount index, we found that poor people slip below the poverty line when they are relocated. If you look at the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of the gap between the rich and the poor in the same socioeconomic class, it was very interesting. We found that while the relocated areas, the gap between the relocated and the left behind increased. By left behind, I mean people who were not relocated, and the relocated became poorer. On the other hand, when we looked at Mumbai, we saw that with in situ development, we found that the families that were part of the in situ development significantly became wealthier. They became significantly wealthier. We looked at eventually the resettled households catch up. It's not that they don't catch up, but it is the Lorenz curve shows that it takes you at least 3 years for the people to level up, and another 2 years for them to actually start, for the tenure impact to start kicking in. So we've lost 5 years of productivity when we are relocating people. But the most significant impact is also visible on the women. Women become poorer. They become disempowered because there are no jobs in the relocated sites that match their skills. And without being able to contribute to the family pot, women are no longer part of the decision making in the family. So they're losing not just the income, they're also losing their ability to take control of their lives. So what was it? The cost benefit analysis, the relocation cost to the government was almost twice or at least 1.5 times more than what it cost. So relocation per house, the benefits were lower, the costs were higher. On the other hand, the in situ upgrading, the benefits were slightly higher than the cost to the government. So again, why no land titles? Why no tenure? Why don't? So there are 3 key issues that that I would like to explore. Number one, there are huge bureaucratic and legal complexities in providing land title, or tenure security. It is amazingly complicated. It is almost impenetrable, and it involves a department that we have never even talked to, the revenue department. Yesterday, Billy talked about the middle class not being there. I think the revenue department, which is the controller of all this land, is an agency that we've never even engaged with. I mean, I know Mr. Sangram is going to be here to present the case for Odisha, but let me just make a point over here that Odisha has been hailed as a success story. And when this happened, we were all terribly excited. Cure was also part of the initial mapping, but what did we see? We have seen that about 1/3 have gotten the titles because these were simple mutations. These were on non-contested lands. Title 1.0 reached its glass ceiling. Even a state-led initiative with all the political might behind it could not change the minds of the revenue department. These are the hardest boundaries ever to be engaged with. Number 2, the deemed value of land. There is an assumption in the heads of the administrators that the city central land is pricey and can be valorized, can be monetized, and therefore we need to resecure the land for ourselves. This recovered land, in our study, we noticed that in majority of the cases, the land that was recovered by slum resettlement was converted into parks, and green areas. Maybe we can calculate that it improved the air pollution, but it was not significant in terms of the commercial value that you think land would bring. The third is that there is also an early mover advantage over here. When we tenure, we are actually giving tenure to people who've already been settled here for a long time, who have all the right IDs, who managed to integrate themselves within the city as far as all the social security benefits, etc. are concerned, and the new migrants who live on rent, and the new migrants, the one we saw moving away during COVID times, these people are still being missed in this whole equation on tenure. So is there life beyond tenure security? Yes. Can ecosystem approaches work? Yes, yes, yes. So to say simply, security is not a sufficient condition. Inclusion and integration can be kickstarted by other processes. What we need to do is we need to change the goalpost. And the goalpost today has to be to include, not to provide a house, to have slum integration and not slum upgrading. I feel that slum upgrading is a very low ambition. We have to aim higher, and we need to change the language. And I think once we change the language, we may have some traction at the policy level. It is doable. Most settlements in all the cities that I worked with are tenable. we found that when we developed the Rajiv Awas or RAY programs, we found 97% of settlements in the city of Agra were tenable. We were requested to reduce a few just so that the city would have sufficient income or access to resources from under RAY so that they can do the investment. But so they are tenable and they are integratable, but our cities have to dare. As Einstein has said, it is insane to do the same things over and over again and expect different results. We need to change our speak, we need to change our narrative, and hopefully, while we are still around, we'll see that in India, slum upgrading can go to scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Renu. This is what I spoke about, passion. I think after you mentioning Odisha, I was tempted to cross the ocean, but I think we have to move to Odisha if the secretary is already ready to share the presentation, because everybody's talking about Odisha, right? And I think Odisha is showing that it's doable. So I think it's important that we listen to you now.
Thank you, Anna, for giving the opportunity. Namaste to all. Mine is a very simple presentation. The presentation is based on the experiences and nothing very intellectual side about that. It's more about implementation, more about the mindset, more about changing the way the people wanted them to change. So it's a very simple presentation. And one of the things that in the beginning you said that the political intervention, the intensity of the feeling of the political people that matters, that absolutely is correct. Unless there is a political decision at the top level to change, one cannot change. The bureaucrats are not that powerful to change, and the people are above everybody. So it's a curious mixture of political will and the will of the people, common will of the people to move forward. So I'll go with my presentation, and as per the prescription, the common thing has been the determining role of land policies and instruments. Yes. So first is land. It's already been told. Land is the key asset for poor, both in rural and urban area. Nothing big about it. Policy can play a crucial role. How we have implemented the policy at the state level, as the Renu madam was telling, and the state level, how we started. I will give a flashback of that in my course of presentation, helping to establish conditions under which land efficiently can be used, ensuring justice for most vulnerable communities. And as you are aware, India is home to millions of urban poor, and Odisha shows how policy can change a crucial role in the settlement for land poor. The catchword is encroachers to settlers. So in our first training of the officers and all the persons who are, we would said no one is an encroacher. He has to be settled. So the language that everybody has want to change is from encroachers to settlers, from eviction to settlement. Now this is the snapshot of Odisha's urban scenario. Odisha is not very highly urbanized, yet not very least urbanized. It's compared to the national average of 32%. We are only 17% of the population living in the urban areas. So 70 lakh population or 7 million population in the urban areas, out of which 25% of the population or 1/4 live in the urban areas. This is the institution. It's the 5 municipal corporations, very big, not exactly very big, yet big in size in terms of Odisha's urban development. Though it's not a very highly urbanized state, but it is catching up. The level of growth of the urbanization in the state is very high compared to the rest of the country. As it was backward in terms of urbanization, it is catching up with the national average. So 48 municipalities and 61 NSEs. So the population in total is 17 lakhs in the slums. So 70 lakhs in the urban areas, at 17 lakhs in the slums. Now, the life in the slums, this is very common slum and very common scenario in the country. So this is also the similar thing in Odisha. So I just want to show a glimpse of what is happening in the state of Odisha and how it looks like. So without security of tenure, poorly built temporary tenements. The same thing all over the world. and Odisha is no exception to this. Life in the slums. This is for inadequate access to safe sanitation, drinking water, unhygienic living condition. You have already discussed yesterday. Today we are also discussing about this. The informal sector is contributing to the formal sector, but many of in the country and the world do not appreciate that the growth engine that we are talking about, the large mega cities are supplemented and complemented by this informal sector. In the state of Odisha, it's the informal sector hugely contributing to the growth and development of the formal sector. Now, and I'm coming to the Odisha's Land Rights and to Slum Dwellers Act 2017, which is the iconic act and for which Odisha was known. On the very day of 10th of August 2017, the Chief Minister came out in a cabinet statement for the first time in the press. He said, evicting slum dwellers or empowering them. This is the question he asked himself. Decided to empower them by providing land rights. That is the Honorable CM. That is political will. So that is how he came out with the ordinance. Then it was turned to be an act itself, which is still continuing from 10th of August 2017. Historic legislation, 10th August 2017, for assisting land rights, for assigning land rights to the slum dwellers in the municipalities and the notified area councils, facilitating redevelopment, rehabilitation, upgradation of slums to livable habitats. So this is the day where the state intervened. Albert, I can only say that absolutely there was not much of pressure from the side of the people, but it is the iconic Chief Minister of the state who thought that I should be with the people rather than people demanding it from their own side. So Urban Poor Welfare Fund was created at the urban local body level for the development of the infrastructure in slums. That is one of the unique things that is in this provided in this Land Rights to Slum Dwellers Act. Now, what is the land quantum of land that is given? Not very big, not very small. In situ settlement of land in 45 square meter and in municipality 60 square meter. In case of relocation, in where it is required, we do not relocate, but where it is required, because of the defense necessities, because of the hazardous land, we will relocate them in a participatory approach. So relocation only 30 square meters. So for the poor people, they do not have to pay till the 30 square meters. So land rights are given only for the residential purposes. It is heritable, mortgageable, and housing loan can be given on that, but it is not transferable. Land right certificate to be accepted as a valid address proof, and the cut-off date was the very day of the historic legislation on 10th of August 2017. And how it started, it came to us how to implement this. Is a thing which probably had no precedence in doing. So as rightly told, it's the revenue department's domain, and any department, it's a legacy department, revenue department never allows any other department to enter into the domain of that. So it was a very tough call. Since it's the call of the Chief Minister, we started with the intervention through the survey, through the process of GIS drone survey. So scientific imputation of value, which brought a lot of credibility to the survey and identification. That's the reason we could be appreciated by the people living in the slums. Second thing is that we went to the community, sat with them, used the goodwill of the urban local bodies and the institution, and we made them a partner in the process of the slum land settlement. That is the reason for which we succeeded. Unless and until you make them a partner, you cannot succeed. So we took that route. The middle of the person who is lifting his hand is the executive officer of the Konark municipality, where the Sun Temple is there. So you can see we went with this, via this route and got success. Now then we went for the having got this ortho image, we went for identification of each plot and made a survey. Now urban slumland household area survey, and dotted everything only by the community. The community identified themselves by forming the slum development association, and they stickered their own houses and got it. Now this is the progress so far. I'll be answering to one of the questions raised by Madam Renu Khosla, talked about the revenue department and also the roadblock created by the revenue department. Now this is the out of 1,80,000, 1/3, as he rightly told, that 65,000 family could get land right certificate. 1.05 lakh could not get it. It's because there are a lot of impediments. rightly. What are the impediments? The state government cannot change the Forest Act. So we had to assure the people living in the forest areas, in the areas which cannot be settled at this point of time, which will take some time, we gave them land entitlement certificates. So this is LRC versus LEC. LEC is an interim method to assuage their feeling that you will get it. We are taking up actions. You are entitled for LRC, but at this point of time, we cannot give you the LRC. We take LEC, land entitlement certificate. LEC has got equal value of LRC, but we'll change it after the land is changed. So we gave both LRC and LEC. Where it is not possible to be given LRC, we gave them LEC. LEC means you are entitled for that. So it answering Renu Khosla's madams that 1/3 has been settled, the rest has been settled also, but it is a question of time. This is the big day where our Chief Minister dedicated this is Jaga mission, and from land rights to integrated development of slums, Jaga mission launched by the Honorable Chief Minister. Now all the verticals that has been described in this webinar, this is the part of the slum we want to upgrade and transferring the life of the people living in the slums. But what is more important is the question of fund. Fund has to be ensured, as has been rightly told during the discussion, that is the budget. It has been mandated by the state government that 25% of the population live in the slums, and you are bound to earmark 25%, minimum 25% in all expenditure. So this is a must, which will entitle them for getting the pie they deserve in the financial mechanism. Now, we have got the recognitions and awards, and these are the awards. World Habitat Award, we got it. That's the reason for which people know about us. Then you got a Geospatial Award. We got the Janagraha Award for the governance. Now, coming to the upgradation, we were talking about that upgradation is a low, a secondary word. Rather, we should use the word integration. Now, question is, unless and until you upgrade the standard of the quality of the infrastructure, life of the people, unless you upgrade the slums, you cannot integrate them. So integration is upgradation is a process for integration. To answer Renu Khosla madam's the question that she has raised, so I can say integration is the destination, but upgradation is the way, the mechanism for which we are going to. So these are the verticals which need the attention of the urban local body. We are working on that. Key infrastructure verticals: developed roads, stormwater, toilets, sanitation, pipe water supply, as you all know about it. Now, this is one of the things which we wanted to develop the identity of the slums, that you will have minimum one infrastructure which will identify yourself. Your identity is called parichaya, or your identity. Each slum will have this type of structure where they will have a minimum common place to sit, discuss their future. And it will be the hand of the SDAs, Slum Development Authority. And after the slum upgradation, this will be named as the RWAs, or Residential Welfare Association. This is a must. And by the side of that, this is how our after the upgradation it is looking like in many slums of the Odisha. And if someone visits Odisha, you will find that there is a lot of change in the slum in the state of Odisha. Now, this is the open space that we have made a must, that wherever there is a slum, you have to develop one minimum small type open space where the children will play, and the elders will sit, and there will be a lot of interaction among themselves. A type of open space to develop their own feeling, and which was never seen in the slums. So this we have mandated that each slum will minimum have one parichaya, or the micro activity center, and minimum one open space to discuss, deliberate, play. A beautiful place we have developed. So the slum upgradation has to, the Chief Minister has said, has to be completed by 3 years. But the way we are approaching, I believe we have got 2,919 number, or say around 3,000 number of slums. We in the department, we think that we'll give a surprise to the Chief Minister by only taking another 1.5 years. Before 3 years, we'll take 2 years to upgrade and integrate. They use the word integrate, and all the slums in the state of Odisha. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Hopefully, I have tried to make a small presentation as small as possible, though it's a very big thing, and I wanted to make it really small. Never gave everything in the plate, but I wanted to serve as little as possible. Thank you for giving the opportunity. It's an excellent opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sangramjit. Yeah, I believe everybody could understand how big is your Islam integration program. From your small presentation, I observed that you attacked several fronts: legal framework, mapping, governance, bureaucracy, and then finally public works and space, designing identity of slums, right? Maybe we can say for the debate, I missed a little bit the role of the cities and the planning, the things that we discussed yesterday. Maybe you can bring that elements afterwards in the debate. But I would like to cross the ocean now and go to Ahmedi and then Ines. So Ahmedi has been working with slum upgrading in South Africa for 20 years, if I'm not mistaken, Ahmedi. And the age of the program is 20 years, right? So South Africa has been prioritizing housing since democratization, but slum upgrading specifically in the last 20 years, there's still a long way to go. But I believe from your experience, you learned a lot, about the rationale why to upgrade slums that could be applied not only for South Africa, but also at the global level right now that we are suffering from COVID. So the floor is yours, Ahmedi.
Thank you very much, and greetings to panel and colleagues. I think the important issue here is I want to take a slightly different tack on the assumption that we've made some progress in South Africa, but the question was, how do we get to scale and how do we establish this as normative practice in governments? And I think everybody has been at it forever. Billy knows that one of the earliest land invasions, occupations, and developments occurs just towards the end of the old regime, just before the dawn of democracy. And that is a very famous project that I had responsibilities for. It's 30 years last year. It's my first attempt at slum upgrading. It's a relatively successful project, and 30 years later, we are doing an evaluation on it, or the NGO is doing the evaluation, and in fact, the NGO was led by Billy. So I've been at it for 30 years. That's true. But I've prepared some notes. It'll be circulated later. I don't want it put up on the screen. And it has two registers, the notion of these two registers. And the register is the bottom looks up towards the state, and then they hope that the state and the politicians and the administrators are looking down at them. And in COVID-19, this is the moment where eye contact is quite important. And so I want to talk about urban, the title of the project in this is Urban Poverty in Contemporary Cities, Informal Settlements in a Time of COVID-19. The first part is just discussing the implications of a global pandemic and what possibilities does it offer? Why is it significant for us? Of course, it's a global pandemic. It's declared by the WHO because the pandemic impacts cities and citizens indiscriminately. We also know the ability to deal with it is based on universal knowledge sharing. And it's really knowledge sharing because the WHO is the secretariat of administrators in which the nomination can only be the top medical person per country. So, and it is run as a technical administration. That already suggests to us that when we want to deal with these issues, we need to start thinking about the kinds of skill sets we bring to bear. It's based on data monitoring frameworks, epidemiologists around the world pulling the data together on a daily basis, and it's subject to hierarchies of expert interpretation to direct executive management of COVID-19. Now that already tells us, how does the team around housing respond to such a crisis? Let's go further. There is a global commitment to how to slow its infection rate and a series of now ritualized preventative and infection management measures. and it's tied to the commitment to a shared vaccine, COVAX. That already in a year since we've had it, we've already established the rules. Whether people will behave by those rules or not is a different matter, but over Zoom and Teams and other mechanisms, these agreements have been reached and the understanding has been shared. So effectively, what do we see? We know all of it. We all wash our hands, wear masks, etc. The key problem, of course, is the question of distance. Now, that's a key mechanism for its spread. Let's keep that in mind. Okay, so what we've reached is a temporary global city national social compact based on solidarity, a temporary closing of the trust deficit. And therefore, we should utilize the moment of the closing of the trust deficit to open up discussions much more earnestly about this. And in South Africa, the attempt was made. I think some NGOs have felt rather disappointed, but the point about it is COVID, as I said, is indiscriminate, and the state will have to respond. Is it a health issue? Is it a housing issue? It is both. Okay, so COVID impacts political, economic, and urban management, consumption, production, reproduction. We know that on a daily basis, a few days ago, New York Times, we'd lose about $375 billion per day as a result of this. This is a huge impact on our society. Okay, so it's economic growth, jobs, etc., the enforcement of spatial distance. And the key issue is it's optimal open communication generally with society, and a societal adherence and civil obedience is essential. Now, this issue is quite important in the social contract. Civil obedience is necessary for the containment of COVID. And in informal settlements, they have been exceptional in doing that. So that question is, if this is our response, what should we expect? For example, a vaccination, or in the instance, I'll come to it in a moment, what else in a housing point of view? It is disruptive to economic growth. A demand and supply shock, says Hausman at the beginning of the impact of the COVID, Hausman at Harvard University. He says it's disruptive to society, but it coalesces with two other disruptive forces, the global warming process and the disruptive force of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, which create greater divides, but also provide the pointers to social rehabilitation. So where are the instruments that we want to pick up from? And now that we're building knowledge sets per settlement in order to respond to COVID, it has to be organized in that way. So at the same time, what COVID has done is suspend the functions, norms, and rules of everyday life, including housing. And therefore, it would have to be remade. And it is being remade as policy on the hoof to respond to the crisis. But it has opened itself to majestic acts of innovation and bravery, frontline workers, and of course, swathes of corrupt activities. So we're losing money, the fiscus is being pressurized, and there's a mix of behavior in response to that. Well, I suppose it should have been expected, except we thought everybody would behave altruistically, but they didn't. Now, this all impacts disproportionately on the poor and marginalized, even from a resource point of view. And in the figures we've been talking in this group, 25% of the population live precariously in the cities we're talking about. So in this group, over the last day, we've said it's about 25% across 3 continents. Now, COVID-19 is endemic, therefore can only be addressed as an all of society solution. Now we must enter into that and say, no one can be left behind because it won't work. That takes us to the question of habitat. If that's the case, from a habitat point of view, it can only be made to work bottom up, settlement by settlement. And it builds on an original habitat commitment to inclusive cities. Now is the top looking down. Inclusive cities are important because you have to nominate and demarcate areas of inclusion and exclusion per COVAX. We cannot carry it out without the self-mobilization and discipline of ordinary people to this. We've seen those who don't want to, but that act of bringing people to the point of vaccination, whether they believe in it or not, is an organizational act. In the immediate, the project is a spatial one. So we must pick up on that. It's focused on the reorganization of private space. It must release density. And then it is in relationship through the last slide, last presentation, to the social public space, reblocking, some people call it, defined by the pandemic norms. We have to create more space for people to socialize outside of their home, and in their home, we have to reorganize it. The discipline of these social relationships is essential to combating COVID-19. But spatial reintegration, from the first speaker, is absolute for citizenship. They cannot get their entitlements and build their capabilities and responsibilities in order to create flourishing mixed income and land use habitats. Now, this that governs social space in vernacular habitats is only a generation away, both in India and South Africa. So it's not new, the notion of creating social space for the purposes of interaction, private and social space, and what kind of private space and social space. So it's not something that we've not been dealing with before. And in a sense, the time for the architects has arrived. This moment is about reorganizing space before anything else for the purposes of the endemic nature of COVID. It assumes, this is critical, it assumes the suspension of evictions will hold as a pandemic requirement. A key victory for the habitat agenda. And in the literature, 1996 at Habitat, in the agenda, the prerequisite for the security of tenure is the suspension of evictions. Suspension of evictions has occurred globally. Now let's go further. The landlords, the banks, the governments, some pernicious exceptions, we know which countries those are, have upheld this pact. And the judiciary of nearly every country has acted to uphold the pandemic housing pact. No evictions. Therefore, we must capture this victory for the purposes of millions of people. The right to housing then is so the right to tenure, security of tenure is non-eviction. We know that, it's in the in our own literature, in Habitat. The right to housing is a prerequisite for the ability to deal with the anticipated coalition of disruption. How do we, the effective demand has to be built. We'll have to build it around the new economy, around nature-based solutions, green growth, and the circular economy. And then supply at this moment, because of land use change and demand shortened, but an extra supply, of course, in the wrong locations, up to 25% in the city of Cape Town, some middle-class areas. Why aren't we releasing it? The Prime Minister in Canada has just agreed to a commitment and released billions of dollars for the purposes of purchasing empty commercial buildings and empty office space for the reconversion into social housing. That is a regulatory decision to say, what are we going to do with 25% real estate that can't be used unless we rezone it immediately and create the conditions for opening it up? Why are we not taking that decision globally? It should be a global decision, which can be, if it's already been adopted by Canada and certain cities in the US, including inclusionary housing conditions. That means you cannot build anew if you cannot release the amount of land for moderate and low income people. So this allows us to revisit, and in the short term, that's the short term. If this allows for the revisiting of the causal pathway of sustainable human settlements, then the unit of analysis has to change. So, for example, the citizen, are they in or out of the city, the household, the neighborhood? And in this, we track the causal pathway and its breakdown. Households are no longer 5 people, they're 2 people, they're 2 men, they're 2 women. That means they're looking for rental, not for ownership. India itself has extended security of tenure in these situations through long-term leases or short-term leases. Those are secure tenure. So we start, no evictions, short-term leases. Leases, no payment on it. The lease is free of charge because it's COVID-19 and we need stability for the next 5 to 6 years because COVID is endemic. Now, finally, reconcile these community commitments with 4 or 5 year plans of government. India, Brazil, South Africa either have 4 or 5 year plans or cycles of government. And then the cycles of investment, the biggest amounts of money going into new housing globally is pension funds. Yet those pension funds don't produce housing for poor people. It is not that the returns can't be guaranteed by the state. It's just that the investment has to be committed for a mixed land use, and the modeling for that can be done. And then we renegotiate with the banks to say that cycles of long-term investment, particularly pension funds, which are used for real estate, 20-year cycles, must be recalibrated. And given the fourth industrial revolution, this is all possible within months, as within months, we've been able to produce a vaccine and an agreement on how it will work for everybody without leaving anyone behind. Without stability, without the right to housing, we cannot win the COVID war. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmedi. I think it's a great link that you made with the global commitments and putting housing conditions, slum integration as part of the global commitments that we need to face as a collective, right? To face the challenges by COVID. Maybe Ines, when Brazil designed this national scale slum upgrading programs, it was not in times of COVID. We already had some institutional advanced legal frameworks and so on, and a lot of political will, right? So maybe you can go back there and share a little bit of the rationale of this program, of this policy in Brazil.
Let me share my presentation.
It's coming. Yeah, it's there.
Okay, perfect. So, good morning, everyone. I'd like to congratulate the organizer, GIZ, INHAF, and in special Seats Alliance. So yesterday, Teresa Herling presented the experience of City São Paulo, which has a lot of innovative aspects. And today I'm going to talking about the Brazil experience in terms of the national government perspective, which is the space I act in for many years. I'm very happy to met a lot of people than I met 30 years ago. Is Anaclaudia put in the floor the passion, how a necessary ingredient to stay in housing issues. So this slide show the long story, the social house in Brazil. In fact, the social house in Brazil started the 1930s. This timeline shows the moments were born from the process of redemocratization in the country, with a new constitution in 1988 that established the social function of property, and the city is a very important issues, and which organized the law statute of cities, which creates many regulatory and urban plan instrument that I believe the most part of you are familiar with. The new constitution also established the municipality as a third level of government. So Brazil is a federation country, federative country with three levels of government, where the municipality has a legal mandatory to legislate with regards of use the land and the urban plan, which puts some complexity to deal with national government and municipality effort. In the other hand, they put the housing with common competence, competence for the national, state, and municipality rules. I'm going to talking about in the period 2003 and 2006 when we have when we can divide the first period with the new institutional framework, and after the better macroeconomic issues, we have increased the investment in urban infrastructure in Islamic grade and later in the housing production. In both cases, the Islamic grade in housing production, I think reached an important scale, considering, of course, the Brazilian params, not the Indian params, is bigger than we have capacity to do. In terms of numbers, we implementate more than the Islamic grade program in more than 100 municipalities, with partnerships with the federal government and the national federal government and the municipalities, in some case with the state governments. In the case the housing production, we reached more than 404 million, no? And 17 houses were delivered. So, what I put some highlights that help us to create a framework that we use it to give scale up the housing programs. It's important to highlight the theme of housing enters in the main agenda of the national government as part of a broader strategy of the economic development to place the reduction poverty and inequality as one its pillar is with house is the most important part. No, housing is component the strategy to reduce poverty in Brazil that in this period. Put some words. No, this is overview. Start with the political decision and commitment. Billy told us about this is very important. We can traduce this commitment in research, in goals, and system of governance. No, in case of the Brazil, we have executive group and directive group. What means we have to put the high level people in to drive this decision to works, to the big program works. And the second point, we have to make reforms to put in place the new approach. The new approach means you have to deal with municipality competence. We have to deal with municipality interests and municipalities' capacities. In terms of guidelines, we have a national social housing system to put in place everybody in the same page. The third point, I think, is improve the regulatory framework for real estate. What means we have to create conditions for private sector, for the social movement, and for municipalities have rule in housing production in Islamic grading programs. The four point increase the mechanisms in instance for social participation. We create the national city council with the most 80 representative person in with the social movements, with the subnational governments, with the university. It's a very interesting experience because the National Council and the National Conference give us a top-down experience and bottom-up. We can share and experience in these two movements. No, it's the two directions, two ways, and the five the 5 point is the revision and improvement the programs to address housing needs. I think the Ahmedi, no, it's the other person says it's important to have a broad perspective to deal with, to face the housing needs. In order to this, we have four main programs in national level. Is PAC Favelas, it's an Islamic grade program. It's one strategy axis of the policy is they have the program have integrate perspective and deal with the large experience with the subnational governments. The Minha Casa Minha Vida is a huge housing program in Brazil that more than 5.7 million housing. Urban land regularization program and prevention and mitigation of risk. I think 2 points is very important and a little bit different than the experience we have before. The social work becomes mandatory in all housing programs, and the capacity build is very strategic for, to put everybody in the same page. I think is a more important point because we have a large country like India, Mexico, and it's take times put all the actors in the same page. Take times is a necessary a permanent way in capacity in building and training. And to close my presentation, I would like to addition some questions. I think the COVID-19 put the question. It put some new question on the table. I think the more important that question, how cost to deal, we need to ask how much cost not to do. I think is important to change the perspective how Ahmedi told us. Here is some example in the Islamic grading program is very similar that we have previous presentation, and I can I would like to share a good news in Brazil this month. The 10 biggest favelas, we are create a new bank, G10, the communitary bank with the 10 biggest favelas in Brazil. It's not directly related with our action in favelas, but is a good news to share with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ines, for also sharing the good news about the G10 bank. So one can see that after, already 13 years after the start of the National Wise Islam Upgrading Program, so many things happen, and this compounded effect. So I wish I could also express my own experience in my eyes when I saw the transformation of these many slums here in São Paulo and many cities in Brazil. So one can see the economic transformation, the social transformation that takes place, right? Unfortunately, we don't have much research and not much research in English to share. But let's then go back to India. Let's go back to the local again. Maybe Mr. Sharad, can you share some experience, your experience in Pune? And then we ground again in India.
Yeah. Hello.
We can hear you well.
Sorry.
Your presentation is there, but on the last slide, I believe.
Yeah. Ramesh. One second. Yeah. Okay. Can you see the presentation now? Can I go?
Yes. Yeah, you can see.
I will touch do my presentation from bottom angle, in a sense that I will limit it to our experiences in Pune and Maharashtra. So,
Mr. Sharad, before
yes?
you start, would you like to put your presentation on your PowerPoint on presentation mode, maybe, so it's easier for the audience to visualize?
Is it correct?
No, it's not.
No, somehow I'm not getting it.
Okay, don't worry. Then just go ahead. Just go ahead.
Okay. So government has done quite a bit, particularly in Maharashtra, which is one of the most urbanized state. And there are projects and projects for doing the housing. If we see the efforts in particularly in Pune, we have under JNU RM where Mr. Mohanty was involved, and BSUP we have formal buildings constructed. We also have in situ slum housing, which has been talk of the town, because the people were rehabilitated at the same place. About altogether 8,000 houses were constructed. SRA, that is a free housing scheme, is also working, and so far about 40 schemes are completed. In Bombay, it has been very successful. My understanding is that more than 2.15 lakhs houses have been constructed. In Pune, around 10,000 houses have been constructed. We also have what is called PMAY, the Prime Minister Awas Yojana, where there is a subsidy of about 2.5 lakhs, but it is again only for the formal building, and there is nothing for the informal building. The harsh reality is that in cities like Mumbai, 60% people stay in slum. In Pune, about 36%. Nagpur and most of the cities has something around 20% people staying in the slums. And formal housing is whether through PMAY or through SRA is the approach of the government. There was only abbreviation where under BSUP there was support to informal housing through NGO participation, and that was possible to construct 4,000 houses. Now, our main question is whether the formal housing is the solution for the poor, and we have seen that for how much the formal housing costs. My predecessors have already expanded that, explained it well, that land is a big issue in all these BSUP or BSUP houses or PMAY houses. The land is given by the government, and the construction cost of about 300 square feet house is coming to about 12 to 15 lakhs of rupees. Plus the infrastructure cost is about 3 lakhs of rupees. So to the urban bodies, it costs about 18 lakhs, including the structure and external infrastructure. Now, so the question is whether formal housing, even if the land is given free, is the solution. And we have found that under the present scheme, whether it is BSUP or PMAY housing, or it is not possible. So what we have been stressing and lobbying with the government, including ULB, including the state government, is that in situ informal housing need to be strengthened. And as other speakers have mentioned, that the cost is much less as far as subsidy is concerned. And there is a possibility of microfinance company giving the loan. Our organization is already working with one microfinance company called Annapurna. They have given the loan to about 78,000 families in the slums, and the recovery is more than 98%. So land tenure is an issue. So if that is sorted, as mentioned by my earlier speakers, that if the limited years tenure is given, then the finance will also start flowing in, and the structures will be improved. As far as the infrastructure is concerned, we have seen that at least in Pune, infrastructure in slum area is extremely good. More than 95% of the houses have tap water supply. 40% of the people do have toilets in the houses, and about 10% houses are already pakka. That means they have the slab. So our observation is very clear that if the quality of life of these poor people need to be improved, then they require finance, they require technical support, which can be given by NGO. Microfinance company can give the finance, and there is a huge network of Bachat group, that is saving groups in this thing. So through that they can access the formal finance. We strongly feel that the Prime Minister Awas Yojana has nothing for the informal housing. So they have 4 verticals. I'm not going to dwell about all 4 verticals, but they are basically for formal houses, and it is builder oriented. At least in Maharashtra, most of the subsidy is given to the builder. I would like to mention here that when Prime Minister announced this program way back in 2015, it was initially for the small houses of less than 30 square meter, and for the people whose income was less than 25,000 rupees per month. But under the pressure of developers and lobbies, slowly the area went on increasing from 30 square meter to 60 to 90. Now the subsidy is available even for 120 square meter house, and for the family whose income is 18 lakhs rupees a year, that is 1.5 lakhs rupees a month. So the reality is that PMAY subsidy has been channelized to thousands of people, but all the subsidy has been cornered by I would say middle class or upper middle class for that matter. And there is a need to have the 5th vertical, where the informal housing is given, if not 2.5 lakhs of rupees, at least 50,000 rupees as a subsidy. We have analyzed, as many speakers have seen, that the huge investment has been done by the people themselves. In Pune, the average house in slums is about 200 square feet. People have invested about 3 to 4 lakhs of rupees. Its market value is about 10 to 15 lakhs of rupees. And local corporation has invested huge amount in providing the basic services which has been talked here, that is giving the water supply, drainage connections, pathways, street lights, and community hall and things like that. People also have constructed a lot of community spaces in the name of temple or masjid or gurudwara or things like that. So formal point, I would conclude with saying that the formal housing is not the solution. We have extremely good study of all the settlements of Pune. Land issue need to be tackled. Many of the speakers have dealt with it. I endorse their views, and if that is tackled, then quality of life of the people can be improved with much less government intervention. People have tremendous capacity to make the changes in the to their quality of life, and their synergy will be utilized in much better way. Well, this is my presentation. Thank you very much. Yes, Anna, I'm finished.
Mr. Sharad,
yes.
I think you built an interesting formula of how to using existing national programs, subsidies, and financial framework, right, and apply to Pune. So it's a great example of innovation at the local level. How can you work with what you already have? So yes. Dr. Mohanty, you are almost the last. So it will be up to you to go back to the initial question of the webinar, right? You have been through several positions throughout your career. So for now, you have an interesting experience and view of the matter in India. So please, the floor is yours.
And I must mention that Dr. Mohanty was the one who supported our in-situ slum upgradation in Pune, where 4,000 houses were constructed. Yes, he was very supportive.
That's correct. So an activist too.
Anyway, thank you, Anna. I would like to take a little bit different view for India. After working as mission director for National Urban Renewal Mission, then coming to the state as chief secretary, I find the problems are much more gigantic than what we thought or what the programs envisaged. If you look at the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, 100,000 crores were slated to be spent in cities. After 7 years, we found that the utilization is very small. It was reduced to 61,000 crores. After 10 years, it was 49,000 crores. So the question is not theory. The question is that why, who does the poverty alleviation function, the land policy function, who provides land, infrastructure, who provides money? And particularly, if you look at the land policies, I think we have taken a very narrow view of land policy. For example, Brazil, we have seen the favelas, we have seen programs in Latin American countries, in South Africa. Now, when you talk of land, land is not a homogeneous good. Today, I am teaching land economics, so I can tell about some theory, practice, and issues. Now, land is nothing but it is not a homogeneous good. It has got many dimensions: horizontal, vertical, that is floor space index, accessibility, access to transport, and then you have got what we call in urban economics the externalities. So land is a very heterogeneous good, inelastic in supply, immobile, durability of structure, land development rights, and land as such, they are separate. So we are dealing, when you talk of land policy, we are dealing with a very heterogeneous, peculiar commodity, and all through we have been talking about horizontal land. Okay, that is number one. And then my minister used to tell in Delhi, the urban poor don't have a place to live, a place to work, and a place to vent. So in the process of planning, not only the markets have failed the poor, the land markets, governments have also failed the poor. In case of India, unlike Brazil or Latin American countries, we are only 34% urban. We have to go a long way to accommodate the poor, rural urban migrants in cities, because the carrying capacity of the rural areas is very limited. Now, coming to the question of land market failure, from a bureaucrat working as a professor, I can tell you, markets fail because of a number of reasons. Externalities, the traditional argument for planning, public goods provision, infrastructure, even affordable housing could be called as social infrastructure, and you have got monopolistic land markets, rampant speculation, land records are in doldrums, heavy speculations, infrastructure spending is not there. So land markets for a poor, for example, when I go from my house to my office, I take an hour for 7 kilometers. A poor person can be located 1 hour away, 20 kilometers away, if transport connectivity is there. One of my students, she did a study on BSUP in Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh, particularly Kanpur, Lucknow, and Dehradun and Haridwar. She found all the relocation schemes are a failure because they are disconnected from the work job, transport connectivity is not there. So for them, housing does not matter, but transportation matters. So when you talk of this market failure, then governments interfere with land use planning, zoning, development control, infrastructure. A fundamental problem in India is that why India? It is with many developing countries. We borrowed the 1947 Town and Country Planning Act in the United Kingdom. Who started master planning? Who is the master planner? My minister used to say, master plans have mastered over the poor. In the Indian, I was reading the city statute, the kind of things they mention in Brazil, that the planner's vision of a city, if we impose, then the poor certainly cannot have a place. For example, in Mumbai, 7%, more than 50% of population, they occupy 7% of the land. It is a complete failure of land markets and failure of governments to correct for failure of land markets. So therefore, we need a complete restructuring of our planning regime. Why the master planning is bad? Master planning, we have followed the Western model. It is based on the norm of the middle class. If the middle class requires X amount of housing, it requires Y amount of land, they multiply it by the population projection, do the projection for the housing, then comes workspace requirement, then comes service requirement. In this process, transportation and conservation, they become residuals in planning. In fact, in the Indian context, the master planners, they presume that land use determines the transport. But there is a big literature, particularly in the American planning literature. It calls the land use transportation feedback cycle. The relationship between transport and land use is not one way, it is two ways. In India, we have neglected transport for very long, and there is an opportunity to re-engineer our cities by transport, public transport, transit, and locating the poor on the transit nodes and corridors, and make them have access to jobs with a commuting time of less than and work time of 15 minutes. This concept has been in a different context in the smart growth, new urbanism, neo-traditionalism. There is a huge literature, but that is a different context. In the Indian context, I think apart from addressing issues of land tenure, security of tenure, affordable housing, water, sanitation, education, health and security, the 7-point charter which used to think of, I think we have to go much beyond, re-engineer our cities with transport, with sustainable land management, and giving a new deal to the poor, because the poor did not find a place in the master plans. I have seen in Hyderabad as Municipal Commissioner Hyderabad, Vizag as Municipal Commissioner Hyderabad. The master plans have no space for the poor. Where will the poor go? You require them for street vending, you require them for vegetables, you require them for newspaper vending, homework, but there is no space for the dwellers in the master plan. What Brazil did, I think India has done quite much better, because Brazil city statute, which is very publicized, I think it came quite late. The Brazilian constitution was amended. In India, we are only 34% urban. And quite, to tell you very frankly, cities like Hyderabad are very inclusive. And the question is, we have not taken, I personally believe that if we liberalize our planning, take care of governance, take care of finance, I think a long-lasting impact is possible. Renuji was talking about government. Which government has got money? No government has money. In fact, in Hyderabad, when I was commissioner, we started a urban poor fund. Sangram was telling about 25% of budget. In JNNURM, we did a P budget, 25% of municipal finance. But 25% of municipal finance surplus is zero, so 25% of zero is zero. So therefore, P budget did not work. Reservation of land did not work at all, because it went against the institutional and market mechanisms. So what do I suggest? Now planning. in my view, the entire process of planning must be restructured. It has to be completely reversed. If I look at Hyderabad being the development authority, vice chairman, and municipal commissioner, our planning is not correct. We ignored conservation. In my view, if you go for a sustainable land management model, the starting point for planning must be conservation, then transportation, then location of the poor and traffic generating activities. Lastly, we should go to high income housing. I think I have written quite a lot. The point is our planning has to be, and the model which I have in mind, what we have done in January, I think Gujarat's town planning scheme model is an excellent model. It is a world model. The models need to be replicated. But there is a new model in Maharashtra, Pune, Magarpata city model, farmers as partners in development. But that model did not have inclusion. Perhaps we could think of inclusionary zoning with incentives, not by dictating to the market, you reserve 10%. The national housing policy dictated. Nobody listened to that. It is after all a guideline. So therefore, if you can have incentive linked densities, incentive linked, because the entire planning process followed from the British town planning tradition is inequitable. You give a benefit of FSI to a person. Land use, residential, non-residential, commercial, you give. But that person does not compensate the losers. It is against the basic economic principle. So therefore, beneficiaries must pay, polluters must pay, congestors pay, users pay, exacerbators pay. These are standard principles of urban finance. If we want to correct for equities, the people who gain from the planning, they must pay towards the cost of affordable housing. There is a very famous judgment in the United States, Mount Carmel, New Jersey state, Mount Carmel judgment. It talks about how affordable housing is a social responsibility. Lastly, coming to finance, which city has got finance? I think we have to make the markets to work wherever they can work, particularly for the lower, poorest of the poor, they have to be taken care by the government. But the low-hanging fruits on affordable housing ladder, they can be promoted by the kind of things which Mashal, Mr. Sharad was telling. So therefore, market segmentation and leaving the people who cannot just fend for themselves, they are the babies of the government. We have seen in JNR1, in Tamil Nadu, excellent housing has been constructed by beneficiary-led housing because they found that it is a felt need. So therefore, coming to financing, it is a very major subject. You cannot discuss about urban finance reform in the post-GST scenario in India without fiscal federalism reform. Coming to governance, our point is who is in charge of the city. Today, we have got too many people in the city, nobody is in charge of the city. So we require planning, financing and governance reforms to make cities inclusive. And to summarize, we need, my suggestion would be something like a town planning scheme in Gujarat, government-led, town planning scheme in Magarpata, private sector-led with inclusion. Something like we have not used the economic instruments. What is the power of vacant land tax? In Hyderabad, a plot of land with 400 square meters pays 1 lakh rupees as the tax. why such kind of things can be done and the proceeds be used for infrastructure and affordable housing. Then pricing of development rights, which Brazil has done through OSDTC and SEPAC model. Fiscal federalism reform, we have written many times about the possibility of sharing of GST. Anyway, so these are, in my view, is that the debate on this affordable housing, housing for all, housing rights must come to a much higher level than the slum upgrading, because we have to prepare for 65% of new urbanization to take place, because India will be definitely 80% urban, and by 2050 it will add another 470 million people. So therefore, I personally feel we need a comprehensive approach much beyond the slum upgrading or the role of the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohanty. Yeah, you're right. But I believe Ahmedi also mentioned the initiatives from Canada, right? Where the social function of these empty, vacant spaces, especially commercial spaces, are offering the opportunity provided by these spaces after COVID, right? And Indian cities, as in Brazil and in South Africa, we do have lots of vacant and empty spaces in the cities that could be used for affordable housing, and including to shelter people from slum upgrading programs, right? So yeah, I think we've seen interesting experiences from the ground in India. Odisha, that created a brand new framework, governance, legislatory. We saw Pune, how Pune could advance. Ajay, using existing mechanisms. Ajay, Renu mentioned experiences on the ground that leads to in the questions on the chat too, that leads to the comprehension that some mechanisms at the national level needs to be reviewed, right? But I just wanted to highlight the emphasis, and this is pretty much related to the thematic of this webinar, the emphasis given by Dr. Mohanty on the need of re-engineer our cities. So redefine planning, right? So I think from yesterday and today, there's already a main consensus on that, that a lot can be done through special planning. There are technical tools, but the political will, the consensus that we're building, Pune, Odisha, the cases that were mentioned, are fundamental for us to restructure the cities, right? So based on that, Kirtee, I don't know if you have a few words around your conclusions on how Islam upgrading is doable in India after all that, right? And also having in mind the pressure, but also the opportunities generated by COVID. We need to act. We cannot wait. There's so many years Brazil waited. There's so many years South Africa waited. There's so many years Odisha waited, right? And India already has strong foundations.
Thank you, Anna. As I told you, if there is a time sort of problem, I would skip my presentation. But knowing fully well that this was a remarkably rich panel, people with experience in government for a long time, people who are running very successful projects, people who have studied this, deeply. I thought what was very important was to state a very simple, fundamental question. And that the real issue is the political issue. It's an issue of political will, political commitment, and political decision-making. You could get lost into large number of issues of how to handle it, how to do it, what will succeed, what will not work, what are systemic problem, all that is absolutely correct. What I decided to do today was to share a communication to a politician. I'm sharing today a letter that I wrote to the housing minister 2 years ago. And this was something very special about this housing minister. One, he was new to the job, and he was new to the sector itself. And I was very keen to communicate to him that slum issue requires to be tackled, that it was getting very late. In 2018, 2019, we can't be asking people to wait for 30 families to share a toilet or 25 families to share a water tap. That is not something that is appropriate, not appropriate for a civilized society, not appropriate for cities, which are engines of economic growth, and therefore it must change. I did this communication 2 years ago, and then I followed this up with another communication to Prime Minister just last month. And I'm sharing a part of that communication because I think it talks a political language. Now, what is that? What I'm saying is this, can we move to the next slide? Yeah. But what I'm saying is this, and I think this is a very important statement to make, that urban slum is a solvable problem. Yes, it's a doable. What is needed is a proper strategy and also a new mindset. It cannot be done with old mindset, which is look at the problem in a certain kind of way. Cities without slums is possible. This country has tried this, didn't work. I don't think it's very important. I think very important is to commit ourselves, know ourselves, the cities without slum is possible. It is workable, is affordable, is viable, and is a doable strategy. Is affordable to the city, is affordable to the state, it is affordable to the poor, and is affordable to the environment. As I said, I'm making the statement to the politicians, so I'm really not going into details. And it is doable in a finite time frame. We can't wait for another 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, which is what I think formal housing would require. Not an informal settlement alone, and this to me is an important departure. We've got to be talking about informal economy as well, because not only address the shelter issue, also address the economy issue. And that is not either or, it's both. It is this and that. What one is saying is this, not only look at housing or shelter and settlement, look at poverty reduction along with improving living conditions. Not only improving shelter and settlement, but also informal economy. This is the kind of message. Next. Next. Well, and to do this, what is required to be done? And this is a point someone made very beautifully. Do not bulldoze, do not evict, and do not shun them as ugly eyesores. Do not see them. Residents are criminal and parasites. They are people like you and me. Whether we admit it or not, they build our cities. And this is a very important statement to make. They build our cities. And even if we do not see it that way, for a change, we should see it from their angle, their point of view, what we call bottom up. It might be our problem, but the slum is their solution. They're not dirty. They're dirty because they do not have municipal services. The government cannot build millions of formal houses even if it wishes to. If the remarkable progress of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana shows little impact in the living condition in slums, it's very interesting. Under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, some 20 million houses are being built, 10 million are in progress. And what is coming out very clearly is this, that even such a large project is not making any major impact on the conditions of slum. And that is, it is not only inefficiency or choke delivery system, It is inherent in the approach that if you go and try and providing pakka houses, formal houses, you're not going to go very far. Next thing is what the poor people, low-income people are creating in our city slums are not perfect solutions. But houses they are, livable they are, affordable they are. And I think this needs to be stated very, very clearly. Next. So what are people's priorities? We talk about Sarkar's priority, we talk about government's priority. For the slum residents, the location is the social and economic asset. In the name of giving them better houses, if you relocate them 20 kilometers away, that is not a service, that is a disservice. Ask a slum dweller in her, what is her priority? What is his priority? Seldom a new pakka house. It is a job, income, location, water, sanitation, health, and education. Also a bus that Mr. Mohanty talked about that allows them to carry their head loads and go to work. This is mass housing, houses by the masses. They are building what they can and afford. We should start our intervention not with what they do not have, but what they have. Houses they have, services they do not have. And therefore, give them services, give them livelihood, give them income. Create employment. They have built these houses on their own. They will improve them on their own also. Also, give them a secure land tenure, property rights to the lands they've built their houses on. Even if you do not want to do that, do whatever, but somehow remove the fear of eviction from the mind and hearts that will motivate them to invest in improving the shelter and settlements. The problem is us, not them. We want our Mumbai to be a Shanghai, our Chennai to be a Singapore. We need either to give it up, that dream, that aspiration, and that ambition. We need to think of a better Mumbai, livable Mumbai, inclusive Mumbai, just Mumbai, everybody's Mumbai, also Chennai. This is mass housing, and this is the way to reaching houses to the masses. Fast, workable, affordable to the people and to the state. Next. 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 So this is not an argument against formal housing. This is an argument to make the houses formal in the way they have been created in the first place, in the way the low income can afford, and to spare the resources of the government to invest in improving the physical infrastructure, social services, and income augmentation and income generation. Trust people. Trust their wanting to improve their lot. Trust their desire to give their children a better deal in life than they got. Believe in the future, their ability for hard work. Believe in the growth strategy of this country. Growth, it is inclusive, will percolate down, will reach these poor, low-income people. Their incomes will improve. They will be able to afford tomorrow what they do not do today. And trust the city's propensity and tendency for recycling, their transformative instinct. They will not remain slummy always. It is in their metabolism to change and become better, more beautiful. This is a transitional phase. In a hurry for more glamorous cities, we cannot sacrifice a whole lot of people and cannot throw them out of sight on the distant peripheries and retard their growth prospect. In our case, to more beautiful cities, we cannot leave the poor, the less income people behind. We've got to carry them along. And the last slide. Last slide. This is not a romanticism. This is realism. This is not keeping the poor in poverty or dirty hovels. This is improving their life in an incremental and doable way. This is undoubtedly a part solution, not a full solution, not the best solution, not the final solution. It is an interim, but a workable, affordable, doable solution. It is people's solution. A development where people matter, development where community plays a role in finding a solution. Development with partnership where a part of the act is performed by the people proactively, and the other part, that is land title and service part, is required from the state. This is inclusive development. Development with a human face. This is a bottom-up perspective on affordable housing, on city development, on urban development, on inclusive development, on a development that is caring, compassionate, sensitive, and sustainable, where people are in the center of the process. It is development without destruction. It is not only housing, it is poverty reduction also. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirtee, for bringing this human face to the debate. This was missing from the beginning. And I think your wisdom, your experience for so many years, and your face that Islam upgrading at scale is doable and we can really work towards changing these people's lives. It's really inspiring for all of us to keep our daily work, wake up tomorrow, despite all we see in the world today. I think it's a wonderful closure for this 2 days webinar. We are 10 minutes away beyond, but if any of the speakers would like to make a final statement, I see Ahmedi's hand is up since yesterday, and around the political wheel, around the big picture. What I understand is that we need to keep talking. These exchanges are really useful for everybody. For me, it has been very useful. And we must find spaces to keep this discussion, to keep this dialogue and this exchange ongoing. Yeah, I don't know if any of you would like to make a final statement before we close. Okay, so I think that's it. We finished the 2 days webinar. Thank you very much.
Well, let me come back for a few minutes and thank everyone. I think I have two responsibility. One is this, and of course, grateful to Cities Alliance and ZIZ for this partnership in organizing this remarkably rich 2 sessions on urban slums, on land policies, and how to deal with the whole issue. It's very remarkable. Thank you very much. Anna, many thanks. You kept the word, 4 months ago when I raised this issue, that why is upgrading not scaling up in India? And this has been very effectively, I think, addressed in the meeting yesterday and meeting today. And we're a galaxy almost of highly capable people presenting themselves. And I'm very, very grateful to ZIZ, for Cities Alliance, to Apanaji and the group which helped putting this together. I must thank the panel yesterday and panel today, who brought in incredibly rich experiences and thought processes. And I think it will be only proper, we'll take only half a minute, that I name each one of them. Thank you, Renu ji. Thank you, Sharad. Thank you, Mohanty Saab, after a long time. Thank you, Ahmedi ji. I've heard about you a great deal, and I think I want to hear from you more. Ajay bhai, Sangramjit, Nayak Saab, we reached you very late. You've been very, very kind. I caught you on a Saturday off day, and you were absolutely open and supportive. Thank you very much. We also made a mistake in your designation because we took it from Google. We didn't tell everyone that you are the mission director of Jaga. Sorry very much. So let me kind of take another half a minute and thank Savnik for introducing this beautifully. Not only introduced, I think, in a webinar, he also went back and summarized what happened yesterday very, very competently. Thank you, Savrik. And of course, we're grateful to my colleagues in Studio INHAF. That's Radhika, Elika, Shimul, Dwani, Nita, and everyone. Thank you very much.
Yogita, Bhuvana, Pablo, Pauline.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Absolutely. I think that's just longness. Right. What I said was because I couldn't remember all the names. So I said Apanaji and the group and Apanaji and the people who supported that. But thank you very, very much. It was very enriching. And this is one battle which cities must win. This is one battle that government must win. This is one battle that civil society must win. We just cannot keep so many people in these conditions. We can't really have a shame of a Bombay where more people live in slums than in ordinary reasonable housing. That is not something acceptable. And therefore, we've got to be talking about strategies and solutions which work, and we work in a finite time frame. And COVID has been a very significantly important bill that, and I think, and other calamities around the corner, if they're not already in, be that climate change, global warming, and we know what happened just 3 days ago in Uttarakhand. So this is all around the corner, and it's our collective responsibility to see that we generate idea, we convince our governments, we take civil society together, and we build workable partnership to take this further. This is something that government cannot do alone. This is something that civil society cannot do alone. We require creative partnership. And this particular effort we are doing since June last year. This is the 44th webinar, all of them on one subject, that is rethinking Indian city. And this is to get to know people. This is to create a platform where people could come together, build relationship, and hopefully find ways to work together. So many thanks again for your presence, for your time, and for your contribution. Thank you.